Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to look at, so last week we looked at PHP. We just introduced it. We just use it as sort of a scripting language, right? We saw how to pass data from a form into a script, and then we could do stuff with it, okay? So PHP or ASP, they exist between your interface and your database. Okay? That's so one of the major things that a server-side script does that it's very useful for is interfacing with your database. Okay? So, so far we've just been playing around with forms. We've been filling them out and validating them, but not doing, okay, so what? We're not doing anything really useful with that information. What we want to be able to do is store that data in a database and or retrieve information from that database so that we can, we can do some programming work with that stuff. Okay? So the first thing that we need to remember is that when we're doing server-side stuff, when we're working with PHP and mySQL or any database, we need to have a local server environment. So either you need to have an environment installed on your computer, your local machine, or you could have a remote development server. That might be an option too. So a tool like Dreamweaver has FTP functionality built right in. So you can browse a remote server with Dreamweaver, and you can edit the files as if they were almost right on your computer. Then when you save it with Dreamweaver, it automatically copies it to your remote server. But usually the workflow that I use is I use a local environment to do the major grunt work, and then once I've finished the majority, then I upload it to the remote server and test it again. Okay. So the server that we're going to use today is the WAMP stack. Okay, so Windows, Apache, MySQL, PHP, and so at the beginning of the year I showed you how to just really easily install that. Okay, so one of the so before we'll come back to PHP, but so how many of you have done any database courses? Have you done any just pure database? Just two? So you guys haven't done any database stuff? No? No courses? Okay. That's okay. No problem. So, database design, that is almost, we could do another 2 or 3 courses just on that.
We can also use ESP with the database. We can also use ESP.
Well, ASP, yeah, so ASP would connect to like SQL Server in the same way that PHP would connect to MySQL Server, or you can use almost any combination of script and database technology.
Nowadays, which one is the latest version of SQL Server, 2012?
That I don't know for sure. I would assume 13 is the latest. Yeah. Okay, so what we're going to do first is maybe just we'll do a quick introduction to just databases in general. Okay, so one of the really good things about WAMP, the WAMP server stack, is it comes with a nice GUI interface to manipulate your database. Okay, so in the past you might have had to have done command line stuff to interface with your database, okay? But somebody has been nice enough to create a web interface for us so that we can manipulate our tables without we don't really need knowledge of SQL. You need just a basic grasp of SQL, and you should be able to manage, okay? At least get started. You should look in further. There are SQL and database technology, it goes very, very deep. You can become an expert just in that part of it. Okay? But so obviously this isn't a course in database design, so we won't spend a lot of time. But if you want to let's say you just want to have a login, an authentication system on your web page, you need some basic tables and stuff to support that. Okay? So the first thing that we want to do, so let's say we're gonna interface with our database today. So the first thing that we have to do is create a database and create some tables for us. Okay? So what we can do is we can go to databases here, and I have a couple of existing databases, but we want to create a new one. So, geez, I forget how to do this. So where do we go here? No, we don't want to log out. I want to go to home, no password, but that's... Oh, you know what it is? I think I remember. It was root. Sorry, I'm just a little unprepared today, but this should be okay. Okay, here we go. So, a little false start. Sorry about that. So, I was logged in as a user without creation credentials. That's why, see, it should be right here, and then we can create our database, okay? So,
Just give me an error when I go to PHP.
PHP? When you try and do what?
PHP has
Yeah.
it's in my hand.
Could not execute. I would recommend, Windows 8. Try, is the server up and running? Like, is it running? Go to localhost. Okay, you know what? Uninstall, reinstall.
Okay.
Try that, and then if not, we'll after the lecture we'll have a look. Okay. So what we're going to do now. So you have your database. That's sort of the highest aspect of your database. So within your database, underneath, you're going to have many tables. Okay, and within the tables, you're going to have columns and rows. Okay, so columns are like variables. Okay, and rows are records. Okay, so let's say, for example, let's create a table. Let's create a database. Let's create a database for. Let's say we're going to create a website for a doctor's office. Okay, so a doctor wants to keep track of his patients, her patients. Okay, so we're going to start, maybe so over the next couple of days, we'll keep that example, and so we'll create some tables that will support that. Okay, so what would be a good name to call our database? What do you think? So remember, our database is going to hold all of our tables that will hold the information for our doctor's office. So what should I call it, maybe? Sorry? Yeah, so or maybe just like doctor's office. Something like that. Okay? So we'll create this. And so now our database has been created. Okay? So now let's go here to our doctor's office. So now what we need to do, so now we have an empty database. There's no tables in it. Okay? So what are some things in a doctor, what are some bits of information in the doctor's office that he or she might want to, that they're interested in keeping track of? What are some things?
Number of patients. God of patients.
Yeah, so information about patients, right? What sort of information? What? Equipment? Okay, how do you mean equipment? In relation to patients? Or separate? So separate, right? So maybe there's lots of like inventory, or he gets equipment in and out. So you might want to keep track of that. So let's go back to patients. What else? What sorts of information do we want to know about patients? What's that? Yeah, maybe diseases, but even simpler than that. Like when you go in, what do they get you to do right off the bat? Exactly. They give you a form and you fill out your name, your address, your phone number, your health card number, blah 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 blah. All this stuff, right? Basic patient information. Okay. So let's do that. Let's create a table that will store information for patients. Okay. So if we're going to store information about patients, what should we name the table? Yeah, sure. Or just patients, right? That? Okay, and so the number of columns is the number of things we want to keep track of each patient. Okay, and each row. So imagine an Excel spreadsheet, right? This is your data. Your tables are analogous to a spreadsheet like this, right? So we could call this spreadsheet patients, and so we have columns and we have rows. So each row is going to represent what? One person's record, right? And each column is going to be a variable. Okay. So what are some things we want to know about our patient?
Contact number, address.
Sure. Phone, address, last name, first name, health card number. What else? Gender, or in this case, sex, because gender refers to sex refers to physiology. Gender refers to something else. It's more social. What's that? Age, absolutely. Weight. What else?
Doctor's name.
Well, that would be the doctor. He knows what, or she knows what her name is already, right? So what else do we got? Just a couple more. We won't get them all, but let's a few more. Sorry? Sure. Email. Sorry? Fee? Like, what do you mean though? Fee? Because does a patient get charged the same thing every time? Okay. Yeah. Sure. Job. Maybe not. That might be an optional fee. Address. We have address. Blood type? Sure. Maybe that's okay for now. Okay? And then so for the first person here, their number might be 555, right? And then 1, 2, 3 Fake Street and Jones and Bob and something like that. Fake numbers, male, age 40, etc., etc. Okay, so each row is going to represent a person. So let's do this in mySQL. Okay, so we just have to estimate the number of columns because we can alter our tables later. Okay, so usually about 10. That should be good. We can add them later or delete them. It doesn't matter. Okay. So the first thing we want to do. So for anytime you have a table, you need what's called a primary key. Okay? Every record in the table needs at least one field that has a value that is totally unique to that row. Okay? Because what if lots of people are named John, right? Lots of people, maybe there's hundreds of John Smiths, right? So it's possible that there could be repeated information in the row. So we need one column that all it does is it differentiates the records. Okay, so usually what we call it is just ID, right? ID or something, right? Or patient ID, but usually because it's part of the table, I would just call it ID, right? So ID. So remember, we have to tell it the type. Okay. Sorry? Well, no, we want it to be, so a varchar, that's like a string, right? And int, usually, if you're just creating a small application, it doesn't really matter, but sometimes, what if you have millions of records, right? Basically, what you want to do is choose the smallest type possible, because you could have a bit. One bit is just 0 or 1. So if you were storing something that was just yes or no, you might want to use bit, because that will reduce the size of your database and make your application run better. Okay? So I think what we want to choose though is ID. We'll choose an int, and the reason we'll do that is because what we're going to do is we're going to click this button, AI. That means auto increment. Okay, and what that means, I'm also going to set this to primary key index. So what that means is when we insert a new record into this database, we don't have to insert the ID. We just insert everything else, and MySQL automatically increments it. So the first user will be user 1, the second user will be user 2, and so on and so on and so on. Okay? You usually want to do that. For an ID, you want to set it to auto increment. Okay? Because you need it to be a unique number. That's it. Okay? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to set the first one to be ID int and auto increment and primary key. Okay, so looking back at our database here, so let's put first name first. So what type should we use for first name? Yeah, varchar. Let's see what else. Maybe we could use we could use any of these. But again, we want to use the smallest possible that will still hold our data. So a char, that's only one, that's not enough. And so varchar is sort of the next one up. So let's pick varchar. Then we have to give it a length. So we have to tell it the max length. So for a first name, well, even let's make it 50 just to be safe. Who knows? Maybe there's probably somebody out there that has a 50-character first name. Somewhere, right? Okay. So default, we don't want any default, and we're not going to make it a key or anything, or auto increment. Okay. Same with last name. We want to make that a varchar and 52. Okay. What else do we have? So phone number. So how are we going to store that? Should we store it as an int? Yes? No. We shouldn't store it as an int. Varchar. Yeah, because it's not... even though there's numbers, the numbers don't represent an integer. So you always, whenever in development, you want your solution to match your problem space as closely as possible. Okay? So we'll keep it a varchar, and I guess probably it would be 7... 10 plus 2 hyphens 12. Let's make it 15 just for safety. Okay. And then what else did we have? Health number. So health card. Same thing. Varchar. Okay. So sex we could have as well, I know it's most people think that sex is binary, but it's a spectrum, and there are many. If you go to some hospitals, there's actually 8 options that you can choose for sex. So let's make that a varchar as well, and we'll make health card. How many numbers in a health card? I think it's let's see. Health card numbers. I'll just look at mine. Okay, how many do we got here? 4, 3, 7, 10, 12 plus 1, 2, 3. So 15. That should be okay. Okay. So we'll set it to be 15, and this will make 20. And what else do we have? Age. So age, what can we set age to be? Yeah, it's probably okay to have an int for age. And let's just put in one more. So let's have weight. I suppose you could, because it is unique to a person. You could use that as the ID, but I wouldn't. That's a judgment call. I wouldn't. I would have a specific ID number, because No, not necessarily, because you could have a home phone with two people, right? So husband, wife, and a son and daughter might have the same phone number. Possibly, even then, that's not a guarantee that it's only one, right? No, I would create a specific ID because it's if we're really getting into details here, it's unique to the doctor's office. So although the health card would work, what if the doctor has a patient without a health card number, and they're just paying out of pocket, right? In that case, then your system is screwed, right? So you have to make sure your system is as robust as possible, meaning it'll work in all these different situations. Okay. Okay. So let's actually go. We'll go ahead with this table for now. We can edit it later. Okay. So we'll just say go. Oops. Actually, we didn't want to do that. I want to do save. Okay. Did that. So now I have a table here. Okay, so what we can do with PHP myadmin is so see how by clicking the mouse, what it did is it automatically generated SQL and produced the results. So this means, and we won't get it. I'm not going to show you too much SQL. Again, this isn't a database course, but you have to know just a little bit. Okay, so what this means is select star. What does star mean? Have you guys used star before? Everything. Okay, so it means select all rows from the table patients. Okay, and it's going to limit. So it's saying select the first 30 rows. Okay, but because there's nothing in it, there's nothing to select. Well, with PHP myadmin, we can actually insert records if we want. So let's do this. I'm going to leave this blank, because it's auto increment, and I'm just going to say Carmen Branjay, okay, health card, and male, and age, I'm 31, and let's say I'm down to about 215 now. Trying to get lighter. Okay, so we'll click go. Okay, so see how, look what it did for us. It generated this, our SQL nicely for us. And so, look, well, let's read this too. So SQL, it almost reads like English. Okay, so what we've done here is we inserted into, okay, and then we're into our database, doctor's office, dot our table, which is patients, and then we're getting ID, first name, so we're inserting, so look how the order is, right? So the first one is ID, and then this is the value, so we're not giving anything for ID. The second one is first name, and we're inserting Carmen, and so on and so forth, okay? So what that's done now is now if I go to browse, it's going to select all, and now I see this record here, okay? Okay, so that's the start of the database side. So let's go back a little bit and look at what's required on the PHP side to now access this. Okay. So what we want to do is we're going to go to our local server. So I'm going to go to my local directory, which is here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder. We'll call it Intro to MySQL PHP. Okay. Oops. Okay, and now I'm going to go to my local host. Okay, and what was that folder called? Okay, so far it's going to have nothing. So we're going to go here. And we're going to create index.php. Okay. And we're going to edit that. Let's edit it with Note++. So we're going to, oops, what's this? Ignore. So again, remember how we open up a PHP? So in our PHP file, we're going to tell it that we're using PHP by doing this, right? So question mark PHP, and then we'll close the question mark. Okay? So what we want to do now is we're going to create a connection to our database. That's the first thing we have to do with PHP. Is we create a connection, and then using that connection we can run queries, just like how we did here when we went to where did I close PHP? Oh, it's in Firefox. So if we go to Doctor's Office and browse, so see how we ran this SQL statement? We can do that in PHP, and we'll get back this data, and then we can do whatever we want with it. Okay? Okay, let's go back here. Let's go back to... okay, so the first thing that we need to do is create a connection, like I said. Okay? So we use an object called it's called the PHP data object, PDO. Okay, it's a newer way of doing it, just as far as the syntax is concerned, but it's essentially it works the same way as the old way. We have to give it a couple of things. We have to tell it where. So remember, your MySQL server can reside either on the same physical machine that your web server is on, or it can be a separate machine. Because if you might have, let's say Facebook, for example, their database is so huge, they likely have hundreds of thousands of machines just dedicated to dealing with the database. Okay, so sometimes there are, you may want to separate the two. You can, or you can have them on the same host. Either way, you have to tell PHP where's the server located. Then you have to tell it the username and password for your database, and then you have to select your database. Okay? Okay. So what we have to do, the other thing we have to do is in our PHPMyAdmin, we have to generate a user for our database, and associate it with our database. Okay, so what that means is that not users that use the website. We're creating a user account for the website itself. Does that make sense? So the website and the script need a user account to access the database. Okay? So that's what we're going to do. We didn't do that before. We're going to go to localhost, databases, and we're going to go to, okay, let's click here, Doctor's Office, and I guess it's in privileges. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to add a user. Okay, and so the username is going to be, let's say, Doctor. Okay, and we're going to use a local host. And the password for now, we'll just keep it simple. We're just going to make it password. Okay, you should probably use something more passwordy like we could generate a password like that. But for now, just to keep things simple, I'm just going to use password. Okay, and get rid of that. Okay, so now what we're going to do is, so we're going to grant all privileges on database Doctor's Office. So we're creating a user called, maybe we'll call it DrDB. Okay? So that's the user it's not really a user. You're creating credentials for your site to access the database. Okay, and then let's see. I'm going to turn on everything for now. You probably shouldn't do that. You should double check and only grant privileges that you need. So you may not want to allow deleting. Okay, so remember, deleting, if you drop a table, let's say we go, okay, let me just finish this and then come back. So I'm going to click go. Okay, so now I have a user Dr. DB associated with the database doctor's office. Okay, so just a couple of things about databases in general. So see here this drop. Okay, drop means delete. That is forever. Okay, that means that's gone, 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 gone. When you delete files off your hard drive using Windows Explorer, it's not really gone. The data's there. All it does is it rewrites the table of contents so that there's nothing pointing to that data. Okay? That's not the case with databases. It's actually gone. Okay? So when you delete data or drop tables, they're gone. So generally you don't delete stuff from your tables. What you can do is, like for example, let's say you want to remove a user. You might have a special column that's a flag that says, is deleted or something. So generally you don't want to delete data. So for example, you may want to, in your privileges, you would want to make sure you would want to dial all of these back until your site doesn't work, and then give the permissions only that are needed. Generally, that's the rule of thumb that you want to follow. Okay. Okay. So there are a lot of pitfalls that you can run into dealing with databases. Okay. But for now, I'm just going to give all permissions, just because then my demos will work and it'll be a little bit easier for me. Okay. So we've created a user, we've given a password, and we've associated that user with the database. Okay. So now what we can do is go back here into our PHP, and we can we're going to set up our database connection. Okay. So the first thing we do is we're gonna just define a couple of string variables that we're then going to pass in to our database connection object. Okay. So we'll call the first one DSN. Okay, and so we're going to make it a string. Okay, and so we're going to say mySQL host equals localhost. Okay, because in this case my web server and PHP scripts are on the same machine as my SQL database. Okay, then I'm going to give it a DB name. And what was the DB name? No, not the table, the database. Doctor's office, right? And remember, it has to be exact. This stuff is case sensitive, and a lot of, even if you have the wrong type of quotes or an extra space, a lot of times it'll fail. So you have to be, your attention to detail when you're dealing with this stuff is so important. It's just a variable name. We could call it anything. Like database server name, or we could call it anything, but we'll just, that's from the example they called it DSN. So let's go, let's just make sure. Doctor's office. Okay, seems good. So that's one. Then the next thing we're going to do is the username. And what was the username? Yeah, Dr. DB, right? And so let's just double check. Dr. DB. Okay? Okay. And then the password. Okay? Don't name your don't use password as your password. Do as I say, don't do as I do. Okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a database object. Okay? And that's going to equal new PDO. Okay? And then we're going to pass in our DSN and our username and our password. Okay? So let's run that and see if we get any errors. Okay, it didn't complain. That doesn't mean it's working perfectly, but that's a good sign so far. Okay. Okay. So now what we can do is let's see here. Where's my what did I do here? Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to try running a query. Okay? So let's just make sure. I always like to just make sure that things are working. So let's make sure that this is, so we'll say hello world. And, okay. So, remember I always like to, you shouldn't write too much code without testing. Okay? Because you don't want to have an error on top of an error on top of an error. Right? Because then you'll be hopeless. So always do a little bit of coding and check. A little bit of coding and check. Okay? Okay, so let's go back. So what we want to do now is I want to query the database. I want to pull all the information from our database. So what we'll do is we'll create another string variable. Okay? And we're going to create a query in a string. And so I want to select all. So how do we do that? Do you remember how to do that? Select star from what? Yep. So we selected the database name already. We could do that. It would be redundant, but we could put that in. But we can just put the table name, which was patients, and that's it. We could leave it at that. Select star from patients. Yeah. Okay. So far that's just all we've done is we've set a string. We haven't actually done the query. Okay. So what we can do now is we could say records equals DB, and then we're going to use this arrow. It's kind of like a dot. Okay, so what we're going to do, so DB is now our object, and we're going to call the query function. And what we're going to pass in is our query string. Okay, so let's run it and see if we get any complaints. Okay, so it seems to be okay so far. So far, so good. Okay, but now what we have to do. Let's see here. Okay, so what we can do now is we can create, so what we've done is we've returned, this is going to be an object now with multiple rows in it. So what we need to do is using a loop, some kind of loop, we want to loop through this structure, this data structure now, and we can loop through all the rows that have been returned. Okay, so what we can do is we could use what's called a for each. Okay, so for each is kind of like a for loop, except it's going to loop through each instance of an object in a collection. So if you have a collection of strings, it'll loop through all the strings and access each string. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to say for each, let's say row. No, we want to say for each records, okay, as row, okay. What we want to do now is, so we're going to access each row. So we're going to say echo row, and this is going to be an associative array now. So we can give it the column names, and it will tell us our columns. So let's say, what was our the value of our columns? So let's go here, and we'll go to patients, and so first name. Let's try that. First name. Okay? Let's try it. Whoops. Okay, line 15. What did I forget here? Yeah, that could be it. There we go. Okay. So now, what if we do this? What if I go back here? Where's my database? Okay, and I'm going to insert another row. Okay, so I'll leave ID blank. So we'll say Bob Smith, a couple of numbers, health card, couple of numbers, male, age 99, he's an old guy, and he's a little light on the weight. So we'll select go. So now when I go back here and I click refresh, what's going to show? Only Bob? Okay. So how would I get it to say first and last name? How would I do that? Like this? Okay. And then what we can do is we can so okay, let's do this. So we'll close, because remember I said often we were going to interleave PHP with HTML. Okay, so what we could do is let's see, what's the easiest way to do this? So let's close PHP here. Okay. And then we'll open it here. Okay, and we'll open it here. Okay, and let's open it here as well. Okay. Oh, where'd that go? Okay, and now what we can do is we could put, let's say, a line break. Don't use line breaks, but just for demonstration. Okay? And now we can format it using HTML and CSS. We can make it, so picture this as taking, now we have, this is the beginning of our website being dynamic now. Okay, so imagine just your regular HTML layout, and now you would have this bit at the top, and wherever you'd want dynamic data, you'd just stick in a little bit of PHP, where it would then put in the right information. Okay? So, does everyone get that sort of high-level overview? That was a really quick intro to, and I glossed over a lot of like SQL and stuff, and but you want for this course, all we're going to learn about is how to get data from the database. So we use select, how to put data in the database, insert. There's another update command that will change values in the database. We'll probably learn about that. We won't look at things like joining, because I mean that is more, that's like a database specific course. But you can, with SQL, you can do really, really powerful things. Like you can do, let's say you had patients, right? Let's say you had a patients table, and then you had another table that stores diseases and matches diseases to patients. You could make a query that says, show me all the patients that had the flu in the last 2 months. And what it will do is it will combine data from multiple tables and produce one table of results, right? That's why it's called a relational database, because the tables are related to each other. Okay? So we're not really going to get into specific database design. You know, through practice, you're gonna sort of be exposed to generally how you should do it. Because there is, I mean, you know, databases are just like programming. There's so many possibilities, and there's kind of a right and a wrong way to do things. And you want your solution to match your problem space as much as possible, so that you don't have the concepts will just make sense to you. Okay, because you know about the problem through intuition, and then if your solution matches that, then you can use that intuition. Okay. Okay. So is everyone pretty clear on those things that we learned, right? So we learned, what did we have to do? So we had to set up a database. We had to set up a table. Then we had to create a user that we associated to that database. Then we had, in PHP, we had to create a connection to that database. And then using the object that we created to create that connection, we ran a query on our database. And now you've seen how we can put data from the database into our web page. Okay? Okay. So I'm going to stop there for... so this is the last new thing I'm going to introduce before the midterm. So for the midterm, don't worry about server-side stuff that we've introduced in the last 2 weeks. So no PHP, no ASP on the midterm. Okay? I just wanted to introduce it to you, so over the next 2 weeks can sort of sink in, right? And then when we come and do the real stuff, we're going to do stuff like sessions. We're going to look at PHP sessions. What that allows you to do is maintain variables between pages. And so using between sessions and our database, we could create an authentication system. So you might have a spot on your website you want only certain users to view, right? And so you can do that with PHP and mySQL and ASP and SQL Server. Okay? Okay, so I'll stop there.